CMMS Radio talks about all things CMMS, computerized maintenance management software, focused on maintenance management. It's the people, the process, and the culture that make your CMMS journey a success. All right, thanks for tuning in. Today, we are joined, you see him on screen if you're watching, we're joined by Andy Gager. Now, I got a lot to say about introducing this man into CMMS Radio for his first ever appearance. It will be the first of many. Andy and I have spent a lot of time recently at what we tend to call HLMs. These are high-level meetings, so shout out to Bob Latino. He is the godfather of the HLM. Mm-hmm. Thank you, sir, for showing us the way. First of all, Andy Gager, AMG International, welcome to CMMS Radio.
Oh, thanks, Greg. It's thank you very much for having me on. I've been looking forward to this for quite some time, and looking forward to our little chit-chat here.
Yeah, and it's it'll be kind of like an HLM, but we'll leave some of that stuff off the recording. But I'm going to ask you a bunch of things about this incredible journey you've had thus far. You've spent a lot of time in different places around the globe. We've talked a lot about that off mic. And I also want to make sure, a lot of people might say, well, how come you're not reading off credentials? Well, Andy has 15 letters after his name, and that doesn't even include everything. So I just want everyone to know that it's not just my opinion, but this is a shared opinion throughout the industry. This man gets it, and he will tell you straight. He's all about focusing in and delivering the outcomes, but he doesn't make it complicated. And the reason I'm saying that, Andy, is I got to see some of the presentation you were in on yesterday, and what that was, and we'll get into all this kind of throughout the conversation, but yesterday you were with ARC Facilities and David Trask. Shout out to David Trask. And you did a presentation that was focused in on maintenance inefficiencies, finding them, and then how to kind of attack those. And I wanted to read a couple of things. You were talking about the hidden cost of maintenance inefficiencies, real world case studies on planning and scheduling gaps. Planning and scheduling is a really big area that people can lean in on and understand better about their organization. It was also about how mismanaged spare parts can disrupt workflows and increase expenses because that creates inefficiency. And you talked about some practical strategies to optimize performance and achieve quick wins. So just in a very kind of succinct way, can you tell us like a little taste of what that was all about, where people could kind of look at their own organization to find these inefficiencies and how to attack them quickly to get some of those quick wins?
Yeah. So let me just echo your shout out to David and to ARC Facilities. That was actually a great episode. We had I don't know, I guess the final number was over 300 people on that call, or that session. And the feedback, they did send out a survey, and the feedback was absolutely incredible. So again, thank you guys very much for that opportunity. So what I talked about yesterday, I started out, and I use this quite often, actually. There's two slides that I use in just about every one of my training programs that I do, my training sessions that I do. And the first one is a graph that shows essentially what the ratio of how much pretty much every organization is set up in the world. And that is 20, 40, 30, and 10 percenters. Okay. And the way I explain that is, and again, let me just back up and just say, look, you could debate with me my ratios, but overall, I'm pretty accurate. And that's been proven over and over again. But, if we take the top 20% of your staff, or at the top, and again, keep the math simple, we have 10 individuals that work in your department. I bet 2 of them are superstars. Okay. And I mean, they're so good. They could, I guess in theory, take over your job, right? I mean, they're that good. And they're rock solid. Okay. No complaints against them, nothing knock against them at all. I love them because every organization needs them. I will come back to that group though. The next 4 people, the next 40% of the organization, I call them the soldiers. They're reliable. They do quality work. They show up every day, all right, and they do again a high level quality work, and they're dependable. But then at the end of the day, they have a life outside of this organization. Again, I love that group. Um, and then the next group down, the 30 percenters, or the next three people in the team, if you will, they may be new to the organization. They may be new to the industry. They may be new to the role, right, or something like this, but they got potential. And then the last 10%, the one, there's always one person in your department, and they're the bottom feeders. Every fiber in their body is negative. Um, Essentially, the best way to describe them is, look, I'm the only one that does any work around here. They're the individuals that go into their annual performance reviews and they've marked themselves with 5s or 10s, whatever the scale is, right across the board. I'm the 20%. Matter of fact, I'm not 20%. I'm the 1%er in this department, right? And in their mind, they truly do believe that they are the superstars, right? And the reality is, they're so negative, right, that it just festers. It's a cancer throughout the department or throughout the organization, because I'm the only one that does any work. I don't know what anybody else in this department does, right? I don't like my boss. I'm not getting paid enough, right? My dog has 3 legs and got voted ugliest dog in the world. So, every fiber in their body is negative. And sometimes, and it's not unusual actually, those individuals sometimes are influencers on the shop floor, and they can do some damage. And the unfortunate thing is, we as managers and supervisors, we want to be that Florence Nightingale and think that we can save them, right? And we work with them and we try to coach them and help them along to move them up, within one of those upper ranks there. And the reality is, we spend, 80 to 90% of our time working with that group, when really this is what we should be doing. Document, document, document. And then that's when we call them into our office and we say, I'm going to use you, Greg. Greg, you're obviously not happy working here. We're not happy with your current performance. So why don't you and I develop your exit strategy from the company? And that's going to catch the attention of that individual one of two ways. Either they're going to get the hint that they're on very, very thin ice, and they'll go off and find another job, which is the best case scenario. Or they'll elevate their game to the 30 or 40 percenters for about 3 days before they fall back to where they've always been, right? So, we have to deal with that. We may not like it. A lot of us do not like conflict, but we have to deal with it. And we have to deal with those individuals because we need to spend most of our time with that 30% group. Okay. Now, what I mentioned yesterday was that 20 percenters, they know, at least in my experience working with that group, they know if they sit back and wait, there will be an emergency and we will call them in, right, to fly in, get our equipment back up and running, right, and fix the equipment, right? And we as managers and supervisors, pat them on the back and say, great job, right? Mm-hmm. And so we are actually rewarding for them to be firefighters, when the reality is we should be rewarding individuals that are identified potential failures before they become failures, so we can capture that, right? And look, we do need firefighters because things break, right? That's sure the way of the world, right? But that 20 percenters, if they know, if they've learned, that's a learned behavior. And I don't need to get all psychological and things on this, but they've learned that if they sit back and wait, we're going to reward their behavior. And I know you have a dog, and that I'm a dog lover, and I've had dogs my entire life now, and I also live on the road. So, and if you remember, my dog's name was Leo, right? I'd be on the road for 3 or 4 weeks at a time, and I would pull into my driveway here, and I'd get out and I'd walk through the front door with my backpack and my luggage, and sitting there at the front door waiting for me. Well, it would be Leo. It certainly wasn't my wife, but there would be Leo sitting there wagging his tail, right? And I'd drop everything. I'd drop my backpack. And you know this. You drop your luggage, you drop your backpack, and you rub his little ears. You go, oh, you're such a good little boy, right? And I'd
Yeah,
walk
yeah.
into the kitchen and I would get him a bone. And I would, that dog didn't do jack. That dog didn't do anything, right? All he did was he met me at the front door because he learned that if he did that, I would reward his behavior. So, I have a big old pair of steel toe boots. Now, if I came walking in the door and there's good old Leo sitting there waiting for me to come in, and I kicked Leo inside the head, wouldn't take very long for him to learn, oh crap, he's home. I'm out of here, right? Again, a learned
Mm-hmm.
behavior. So are we, as organizations, are we rewarding the correct behaviors? The other slide that I showed yesterday is essentially every organization in the world is set up for conflict. And that conflict comes from the key performance indicators that each of us have working in the organizations, the KPIs, the metrics, measures, whatever you want to call them, right? And what I said yesterday was, if that is what you're measuring my performance on, okay, then that is going to drive my behavior. I am going to hit my numbers, whatever those numbers are, and that's what you're measuring me on. And because we all work in our own functional cylinders, as I said. So my functional cylinder, these are the KPIs for that. I am going to make sure that my house is clean. No offense, but I don't really care about yours. So, the story I talk about there is, I got operations or production in their functional cylinder. Their KPI is produce as much as you can, right? So you don't shut that equipment down for anything. And then, so that's driving their behaviors. By the way, that's one of the reasons why the easiest job to take out of a production schedule is a PM. That's the easiest job to take out of a production schedule. Maintenance will show
Well,
up to do a PM and they're like, well, wait a minute, everything's running just fine. Don't touch it. We got to get through this run. So that's the easiest job to take out of a production schedule. Now, if I'm looking at the maintenance side and their functional cylinders, one of their KPIs might be, availability or maintainability or really reliability and availability. Okay. So, they want one of everything in the warehouse or in the MRO storeroom. Better yet, build me a whole nother assembly line over here or a whole nother factory, better yet. Because if this line goes down, I'll just flex my labor over to this line. Maintenance, you do whatever voodoo magic you guys do on maintenance to get me back up and running. So they're being driven by different KPIs. Now, if I look at my supply chain, and this is, you saw that and you like that comment, supply chain is being driven by lowering cost. That's one of their key performance indicators. Reduce inventories, reduce costs. Okay.
right.
And where I see it more relevant is if we're a multi-division and we have corporate procurement. And they can, one of their buyers can go to, as I said yesterday, they can go to China and go buy bamboo bearings, right?
Those
Did you
won't
reduce
last.
costs? Check, right? I can get really cheap bamboo bearings coming in from China. Okay. And I have another multiple stories about that. But what damage is that causing ultimately to the organization? Because they're going to have to change those bamboo bearings out every hour. Shut down production, maintenance has to come in, all of those. And we may actually have to spend a little bit more money because the total cost of ownership and the life cycle of those spare parts far exceed, the cheaper ones. So
You know, I've
organizations have to understand this.
I've got a question about all of this because this really common theme since I've been doing this and even going years back, and it seems to be ever present for the things you've seen, the things you've done, trying to make these essentially behavioral changes that come down to people and process. What do we actually know? We know what it is. We know what the problem is, but why does it keep happening? Is there something that somebody is not doing when it comes to assessing and understanding how their organization functions when it comes to the maintenance as well as the overall goals of more throughput? Is there something very specific, or is it different for every organization? What's the catalyst, or what's the one thing that they're refusing to do that keeps causing this?
Well, I mean, that's actually a pretty complicated question, because there's no silver bullet to answer that. But again, I can only speak from my experience. Most of the leadership teams that I've worked with come from the operation or the engineering side of the business. Very few come from maintenance or understand maintenance. Okay, look, if we're going to be completely honest, operations rules the roost, because in their mind that's what makes the money. That's what makes the money for this organization is production. But I boil it down to the chicken and the egg.
Mm.
Yes, production, you produce the products or the conversion services or whatever the case may be that generates revenue for the company. But without that equipment, you're not producing anything. So we're in this thing together. So, to finish up that functional cylinder or functional cylinder story, we need to organize. We need to set up the organization where we're in this together. For instance, one KPI might be overall equipment effectiveness, right? Because that's going to impact the whole organization. We're breaking down those functional cylinders and we're making them more horizontal, right? Because we're in this together. And when I go into private industries, when I go into individual organizations and I do in-house trainings, I will go around the room and I'll say, who do you get your paycheck from? Who do you get your paycheck from? Who do you get your paycheck from? And you know what? They all say the same company. And I'm like, that's my point. That's my point. We're all getting our paycheck from the same company. So help a brother out, right? Let's work this thing together.
Yeah.
Now back to your point, you know, there's a couple senior leadership individuals that I've respected over the years. The ones I don't respect are the ones that don't go out to the place of value where the money is being made. Money, and this has gotten me in a lot of trouble over the years. Okay. When I sit in the boardroom and I tell the folks in that boardroom, you're not making the company any money. The money is being made out there on the shop floor. That's where the money is being made. So you need to get out there and understand what are some of the barriers preventing, from us to achieving excellence. Is it operations? Is it from the maintenance side? I mean, is it our engineer? What is it? But you're not going to learn that from sitting in your office or sitting in meetings all day, right?
So true. When it comes to this boardroom leadership, not really getting out there amongst them, if you will, on the plant floor, all that kind of stuff. There's some kind of viewpoints where some of that doesn't need to happen because that's not what they do, but that creates this blind spot and this kind of altering viewpoint, right?
So let me go back and share with you a story when I first started manufacturing. So the offices were in the front of the building, okay, and the manufacturing was behind what we called the wall. Okay, so the wall divided the front offices with us on the shop floor. And senior leadership was making decisions that impacted us on the shop floor without first coming out and talking to us before they made those changes. And this is what I talked about yesterday. I said, when I'm in the facility, there's two languages I speak. Okay, because I'm a shop floor rat at heart. That's where I came up through. Okay. So I can relate to people on the shop floor.
Yeah.
Okay. But I can also relate to presidents and CEOs of some of the largest companies in the world. Okay. But they were making decisions that impacted us. They impacted me, right? That's the WIFM. What's in it for me? These decisions. How's this
Yeah.
impacting me on a personal level without any input from us? Okay. And we called it, the wall. They were making decisions on the other side of the wall. Well, then guess what happened? I was then promoted, and I was now sitting on the other side of the wall, and now I was one of them. And I
Hmm.
can vividly remember sitting in some of these first couple meetings in our conference room, and they were tossing around making some changes, and silly me piped up and said, "Well, wait a minute. Has anybody went out there and talked to the folks on the shop floor to see, one, how does this impact them? And two, what are their ideas about this? Do they have any ideas on how to make this, whatever this was that they want to change? They essentially looked at me and like, shut up, new guy. Right. And that just always just stuck with me. It's like, but wait a minute, you're impacting people's lives out there, whether you're changing hours or changing their roles or whatever the case may be. But if you want people to get on board with this, one, they got to trust you, and two, they got to buy into it. Right?
Yeah.
Because everybody, this, and everybody on that's going to review this or see this, know that I'm not going to get on board if I don't agree with it. Right? And so the adoption or the adaption of whatever that change is will fail.
So, and I think there's a lot of great folks out here talking about that, pointing that out, and it doesn't really change, but sometimes it changes temporarily, and it's kind of destined to circle around again when maybe there's some leaders out there that say, you know what? Yeah, we're going to incorporate that approach. We're going to get out there. We're going to see what's going on before we start making changes. And then that leader might leave, or you might lose a champion. And
Correct.
I think, if anybody's looking for that magic solution, that easy button, it's not there. But we do know that it's simple, it's direct, and it's impactful. I think we can agree on that. And they just need to make, whoever they are, all of us need to make a better practice of that. And I think that's why we just keep talking about it, because invariably it goes off the rails at some point. Some companies do it really, really well. I want to switch the conversation to very specifically the CMMS. And I have often taken the approach for, a couple of decades plus now, where if you don't know what you have, if you don't know where you have it, if you don't know who's working on it, if you don't know why it's there in the first place, and all that type of information about your facility, production facility or otherwise, because every facility is a production facility of some kind or another. That's one of the main reasons I think organizations should have some form of a CMMS or maintenance management system that documents a lot of these things. I want to know where that equipment is. I want to know when it failed. I want to know what we did to it, all those things. But you and I have talked about how shockingly common it is that even large organizations don't have that level of, I don't think sophistication is the right way to look at it, that level of insight into their own businesses when it comes to the maintenance operations, the equipment operations. How common is that? And should I be shocked, or is it no big deal?
Oh, it's a big deal. Let's get that out of the way. It's a big deal. And again, I'm not going to mention, but the situation I'm working with right now.
Mm-hmm.
They don't have a CMMS system. And my challenge is I need to help them develop a PM program on some of their most critical pieces of equipment. And I have no failure. They have no CMMS. I have no failure history. I have no material usage, right? I have nothing to work with. And, I'm frustrated, right? Because I'm trying to do the best I can with the extremely limited information that's available to me. But, when we're talking about the CMMS, you have to have one. And to your point, right? And I get asked this question quite often. What are the top three things I have to have, right, for a successful organization in the maintenance world? And I'm like, you have to have an asset registry. You have to have an asset registry. Registry, asset hierarchy, equipment bill of materials. And you have to capture all that information in the CMMS system. You have to have a work order system. You have to have a spare parts system. And all that is captured in your CMMS system. Now, we can go on and talk about all this stuff, right? But, what I see around the world is a lot of leadership. I'm going to go back to leadership a little bit here. They're going to invest millions of dollars investing in this thing called SAP because they think it's going to solve world hunger by Friday, right? And then they spend all this money and they get a group of us together to sit in a room, and some sales guy who knows SAP, like the back of their hand, trying to train us on how to use this tool. in 4 hours, the expectation is we're going to be SAP SMEs. And the reality is that's just not going to happen, right? So they go away. The expectation from leadership is we spend a lot of money. You're going to use this system. And very shortly after that, Greg, and I know you know this, is everybody thinks that SAP sucks,
Right.
right? There's all sorts of acronyms for SAP, right? Stop all production, sorry, yes program, it goes on, right? And what I tell people, and this goes for any CMMS, SAP is not a bad system. Maximo is not a bad system, right? JDE, well, I'm dating myself with JDE, but any of these CMMS systems, they're not necessarily bad systems. What was terrible and what sucked was the way you were trained to use the tool. That's what sucked. Okay. Um, you need to properly, and by the way, none of these CMMS systems are going to make your organization reliable. All right. I don't care what it is. It's not going to make you reliable. It is a tool that can help you become more reliable, right? Using the data, the good data in those systems. That's what's going to help you become more reliable. But the tool itself does not make organizations reliable.
That it so much that you said there is really important to some of the I try to grow myself in my viewpoint of this whole world of maintenance management, and I try to stay agnostic when it comes to systems, but those bigger enterprise level systems, the reason I have some issues with them is exactly what you described. Is on one hand we may think they're unusable, but on the other hand it's simply a matter of finding out how to use it, building that adoption, getting those real bits of buy-in because it's making an impact. And
Mm-hmm.
it's Brian Bieski extremely well. He's a great friend and he's a real industry pro, someone that gets it. And he and I have talked many a time, and he will say, yeah, I might butcher this a little bit. I don't care what CMMS we have at this organization. We can use it. We can make it work, because what this is really about is not the solution. It's about the people in the process. And then when you talk about that training piece, this is why I'm starting to turn the corner a little bit on some of those systems, because I'm starting to learn who knows how to help people actually use them, because the companies that provide them and sell them, by design or otherwise, they're not effectively training people. And I'm not necessarily blaming them, but part of me wants to. I think everybody's kind of got a role or a bit of responsibility when it comes to better training on these systems. I still wonder though. This is what I want to ask you: is it that simple, or am I missing anything?
No. So, I mean, let's talk reality. So, so, and I'm not going to whitewash. I'm certainly not going to say all CMMS system salespeople are in it for the money, right? To sell the software, do the minimum training, and then cash the checks, right?
Yeah.
I'm not saying that, but there are certainly a large percentage of companies out there that do that. I'll sell you the software, I'll do some training for you, and then after that, make the check payable to blah blah, fill in the
Yeah.
blank, right? So, but for me, when I develop any of my training programs, okay, we have to understand adult learning styles. Okay, 38% of adults do not learn by the traditional stand and deliver methodology of teaching, particularly in the maintenance group field. Those individuals, they're not wired to learn like that. They're not wired to learn a new skill from looking at PowerPoint presentations or looking at computer screens. The way they're wired is, all right, tell me what I got to do a little bit and let me figure it out. They're hands on,
Mm-hmm.
right? So all my training programs are with that in mind. Here's a theory, here's an application. Now prove to me you're competent in this. It's not enough for me to say, okay, here's the theory, here's an application. Best of luck. You have to prove to me competency, and that's the same thing with any of these CMMS salespeople. Is okay. Let me walk you through a couple of these different sessions. Here's some homework for you to do. They call it a sandbox, right? So here, let's download some live data. You do some tractions, how to receive, how to issue, how to create a work order. All this type of transactional stuff that you'll be doing day to day, day in and day out. Okay. Now show me. Now show me that you know how to do this. Okay. And then I can at least have a certain level, a comfort level. Okay. You've shown me you know how to do this. So I'm pretty cool with that.
Yeah. That
Does that make sense?
I think it makes sense, and I think it also explains why, there are consulting groups like your own and others that can kind of step in to provide that level of resource for clients that want to go through that process. I think that's part of why they exist, because the company's providing the solutions. It's expensive to provide that level of support and training. I think
Mm-hmm.
it's absolutely expensive. Um, I've even over the years told folks looking at solutions that no matter what you do, even if you have to pay for it, you're going to need comprehensive training, and you're going to need some form of reinforcement on a periodic basis, that you do not, just like a PM on a piece of equipment, that you do not skip or defer, because that's where you'll go off the rails again. I think we're trying to be fair here, but at the same time, there is a big gap out there when it comes to how users learn and how providers of solutions teach them. They've got to, I guess, be better and be careful on how hard that call out should be. But this
Mm-hmm.
is where I'm at right now with kind of understanding the value of the right kind of consultants and trainers that are kind of sitting in the middle between clients and solution providers that have what we perceive as excessive complexity.
Well, one of the questions, and I certainly don't have the answer, but the question is, you know, how expensive is it if you don't properly train the people on how to use the tool? Because
Well,
what
that's
I've
long
seen,
game.
because what I've personally witnessed is, yes, they've spent millions of dollars to bring in this new CMMS system, right? They weren't properly trained on it, so that's when they start doing workarounds. That's when they start bringing Excel spreadsheets back into play, right? And they're like, yeah, we've dabbled in it a little bit, but you know what? It's much easier just to do it in an Excel spreadsheet because that's the way we've always done things, right? So, so you really got to you need to be aware of that if that happens. Is if we don't properly train the people to use the tool that was intended, are they now regressing back to using things the old, taking, one step forward, two or three steps backwards and reverting back to Excel spreadsheets or, whatever they wanted, whenever. Look, I've worked with organizations that have actually kept the legacies up and running,
Yeah.
right? So they've gone this new system, but everybody's not used to it. They like that DOS black background with the green lettering, right? And because they're comfortable and that's their comfort zone, right? And I get it. But if you properly train them and reinforce that training and show them like there is better ways, then that's when, to go back to what I just said, they'll be more apt to adopt to that system than to go back.
Yeah. And I think overall, maybe what we're saying is, regardless of the CMMS that you have, that's going to be your way forward. And if you are, you know, holding on to your archaic legacy systems because that's what we're accustomed to, then maybe you just haven't found the right new system that meets your process. Because another question I want to ask about, you kind of touched on it, and this is something that came up a couple of weeks ago. We were doing an awesome site visit, and I was hanging out with Brian Bieski, and we were talking about how sometimes companies will come in and whatever they have, whatever they offer, whatever they understand, they'll try to get that organization to meet that kind of framework, as opposed to kind of figuring out, more importantly, I believe, how that company works, what is successful for them now, and how can we meet that process, as opposed to, hey, you need to change these 10 things, when maybe they just need to improve 3 areas and drop one of the things they've been doing, because now you can get them moving the way they already move a little bit better. Does any of that kind of, I mean, does it make sense? Am
No,
I common?
100%. There's a term that we use for that. Exactly what you just described. It's called putting the cart before the horse. That's exactly what you just explained. And I see that more relevant with the more sophisticated systems, such as SAP. They're like, okay, here's SAP out of the box. Now you need to work your processes around to support SAP.
Ah,
That's the
yeah,
cart
yeah,
before the horse. No, 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 no. Your system needs to adapt to the way we're conducting business. And how does your product support our business processes? Not the other way around.
yes,
I'm not in business to support your CMMS. Let's get that on. Let's get that right off the table right away.
yeah,
Right.
yeah,
Your role is to support my business processes. Now, with that said, there may be some minor tweaks, but I'm not going to recreate the wheel to support your CMMS system.
yeah. I think that's where the kind of the rub is, where that we understand there's all these products out there and they were purpose built, and then that starts to get out of hand because you start pulling in different types of clients and all this, and then you start to believe that you know the process that's going to fix all of them, and that's just not the case. And there has to be a different approach. And I don't know if I'm right. I just think it's a better way. I don't know if
Well,
I'm right about that.
first of all, you just can't come in here and just pull that nice little shiny little software out of the box and say, okay, here it is. A good salesman will actually listen to the client and understand their business processes, okay? And then that's how they set up. That's how they do the configuration
Hmm.
of that system to meet the business needs and requirements. It's not the other way around.
I do also think that there are opportunities to understand. If you really know what you're doing and you really have understood the client, you can help them identify opportunities where something you've seen succeed for others in a similar industry. Have you considered making this slight change to your work process? Because I think the secret to secret's the wrong word. I think what you're really doing when you're leveraging technology to, web enable or digitize, whatever you want to call it, I don't care, to improve what you already do, that a lot of times that's why a CMMS is being brought in. Pure and simple for the documentation, the real solid contextual, right, meaningful data, the right data about what
Mm-hmm.
you already do really well, because you want to do it even better. And you need data in order to make data driven decisions. You need the data in
Yeah.
order to make business cases for leadership. Leadership speaks KPIs, dollars and cents.
Mm-hmm.
And without that, we come all the way back to full circle why you get a CMMS or something like it. Um, I think my biggest concern is, how the hell do clients find a CMMS when there's hundreds and hundreds of them out there? That's another one I wanted to bring up to you. Like, if you had to go into a client site and say, all right, you need this, do you tend to favor things you're familiar with, or is there another approach that people could take out there when they're on the search for a CMMS solution? How do I find one that understands me? How do I find one amongst 400 or 500 solutions that I should actually be talking to?
Yeah. I actually get asked that question more times than you think. Um, my answer to that is it's I'm going to answer like a consultant. Depends. um, and what I mean by that is, what's the size of the organization? Are you private? Are you public? Right? Um, uh, what's the size? What's the industry you're in? Because I don't want to look for the small organizations, and I can't really define what that means, small, right? But
Mm,
yeah, I'm not going to recommend they go and look at SAP and spend several $1 million, because I think that's just way too much, right? I think you don't need that. Okay. But if we go to some of the mid-sized, maybe the smaller organizations that need it, then maybe that's when I do start taking a look at them. And I don't necessarily, I'm not, I'm not linked to any CMM. I'm not a representative for any CMMS system. There are some that I do prefer over others. Um, Upkeep is one of them. I'm not a paid spokesman for Upkeep, but I've seen Upkeep. I've seen the capabilities of Upkeep. I think it's a very good product. I think their support staff is very good, but you know, I don't think you're going to see, Exxon Mobil's or, some of these, Boeings go with an upkeep. I think they're more at the SAP, EAM, sophisticated levels or more
Yeah.
complicated levels, right? So
Yeah.
to answer your question, that's the best way I can answer. I don't necessarily recommend specifics, but it is based on a couple different criteria that I see, and
Right.
and essentially is I'm not going to steer them down to say, hey, I really think you need to go to this system, even though I think it's a little overkill.
Sure. Sure. And that's, I mean, again, as much as I want to solve it for everyone, some of my typical advice has been over the years, look to your peer group, look to people that you know
Yeah.
well that are moving really well in this same process, and ask them what they use. And if you can somehow get yourself a quick short list, 3, 4, maybe 5
Oh,
companies. I don't think
for
going
sure.
beyond that makes any sense. But
For sure.
you do that assessment, and when you find what fits, when you find what your team is going to be excited about, when you've met with your team, you understand what's working, what's not, whether you're first time getting a CMMS or you're going to get rid of one, before you get rid of your CMMS, really find out if you have to. You might not have to. It's that's kind of a tenuous thing, but
Yeah.
I I
Yeah.
prefer that simple approach where when you find what works and it makes sense and the problems you're trying to solve with that solution uh, have a large enough magnitude or cost where you can afford the solution, you're with a vendor that gets you, they understand you, they trust you, they're going to support you, move forward, and I think if you try to look at every system out there, they all start to look the same and feel the same. And I think we both agree they're all quite similar up until that around 80% mark. And then there's 20% differences that are nuanced. I think people
Hmm.
should look at industry specific solutions. I think solution providers should be a hell of a lot more fearless about who and what they are and why they were built, as opposed to trying to satisfy everyone. Look,
Yeah. Right.
boardrooms aren't going to like that, but that's how I feel about it.
Well,
Specificity plays.
so Greg, let me go back to when I was in private industry. I was on 4 core implementation teams for 4 software implementations.
Hmm.
So I was on the implementation teams, and that's what you just described is exactly how we did it. All right, we whittled it down as a team. Look, these are the players in our industry. Now let's take a look at them. Let's see, do something, and we did. We whittled it down to 3 or 4 um, suppliers. We brought them in so they could do their dog and pony show. And to your point, by the way, and I agree with 100%. Okay, it was pretty easy once we got down to those, final 4, right? One was almost eliminated immediately. Okay, it took a little while to whittle the other 3 down, but then we got it down to 2 people. And you know what? To be honest with you, it came down to who we liked better. Very much in
Mm.
consulting, it's very much like in my industry. We essentially all do the same things. We may call it something different, or we may have a different approach, but at the end of the day, we're essentially all doing the same thing, right? We want to improve our equipment reliability and help operations and all that stuff, right? So, however avenue or road or boulevard we all take, it all leads to the same, essentially, to the same Emerald City. Okay, but again, in my experience of doing this for a very long time, a lot of times it comes down to, do I like Andy Gager more than Joe Smith? Okay. And that's what it comes to. Can I work with Andy Gager, or can I work better with this other one? And I don't necessarily have a problem with that, right? Because I truly do believe we need to partner in this. And if
Hmm.
we just
Hmm.
don't, if we just don't see eye to eye, or somewhere down the road, I see conflict, or they see conflict coming. All right, then let's go to somebody we truly believe that we can work with. Same with our CMMS. Do I like the person that's going to come in here and train my staff, and can we work with that individual? And do they have our best needs, forefront,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
Well, and that's where, this, they sound buzzy, but when you're trying to help somebody or they want you to help them understand if you're the right solution for them, whether you're a consultant, you work at a CMMS company, whatever it might be, it's to be that trusted advisor.
Mm-hmm.
You first have to really understand your client, and clients are typically quite aware of who gets them and who doesn't, as opposed to, yeah, I'd like clients to be sharpening their radar on, who's full of shit and who doesn't really know what they're talking about. There's really something to be said when we talk about the idea of likability, which is really based on kind of trust and understanding. And
Hmm.
that's the most important part of this whole thing, is building it on a relationship. The technology can do a lot, but it has to make sense for your organization rather than the organization that's selling it to you, and a little bit vice versa. So, I mean, we could go round and round on this, but I think we're talking about the same thing: is keep it simple, try to put these vendors to the test. When you're working with consultants, do the same thing. Ask them tough questions. I tell people, ask as tough a question as you can come up with. And they're like, well, how do I come up with a tough question? Ask them something that's so critically important to you that you will know instantly when they answer you if they've understood you or not. That's it. It's real simple. how how about this one?
Okay.
Because I got to get you into the fun question segment for sure, because it's
All
your
right.
first time on CMMS Radio. But
All right.
I got one thing I want to ask you about that I think is starting to become thematic for me. I want to understand the role of operators in machine failures and or line disruptions versus maintenance. Here's why. I'm starting to learn from different folks that operators can and do cause a lot of the issues, and it's far greater an operator issue than it is a maintenance issue that causes the disruptions. I don't know if that's right or wrong. I'm very curious what your experience and viewpoint is on that.
Okay. So for the first 20 years of my career, I worked in operations.
Hmm.
Okay, either on the shop floor, on the operation side, and then in the leadership. The last 22 or 23 years on the maintenance, reliability, and leadership side, along with operations, but primarily in the maintenance, reliability. So I've seen both sides of the fence, right? So I consider myself to be in a fairly unique situation because I can view the world from both sides of the fence. Okay, my answer to your question is 74% of equipment failure is caused by the operation of the equipment.
Wow.
66% or 63% of maintenance activities, though, are self induced. So let me explain. There's a lot of organizations that I've worked with over the years where the culture of the operators are breakdown means break time. I'm not being paid to identify equipment failures. I'm getting paid to run the equipment. If it fails, that's not my problem. That's maintenance's issue. Okay.
Mm.
Or it's the end of the shift. I know there's something wrong with the equipment going on here. Let the second or third shift worry about it. So they'll just let it go. Okay. Um, I'm also going to say that most operators have never been formally trained on their equipment. Exactly what is the function of your equipment, how to operate this equipment properly. This is what you look for, all right, on your equipment. Here's some troubleshooting. Here's some basic things that you should be looking at on your equipment. You should be keeping your equipment clean, okay? Because you own it. You own the equipment, okay? Now, I'm gonna put a lot of the results of our equipment failure are based on the operators. Now, on the maintenance side, I'm going to go back to my 20, my 20, 40, 30, and 10. Um, Not all maintenance technicians execute a corrective maintenance job the same way. They do it the way they think it should be done. Okay. Now there's a story that I can share with you, and I share with it all the time. I did quite a bit of work in West Texas. I may have told you this. Um, I was I was only a couple miles from New Mexico, so I was out in the patch, as they call it. I was out working out in the patch. Now, some of
Hmm.
those oil wells, right? They could be 100 miles away from the maintenance shop, literally. Okay, and I was in the morning meeting, and the maintenance manager, a gentleman named Bill Brown, who I became good friends with. Bill. So if Bill's listening, Bill, I hope you're still enjoying your Chevys. Um, Bill was handing out the job assignments one morning, and he handed a work order to one of the technicians. And I was watching the tech. The tech looked at the work order. He opened it up and he said, "Hey, Bill, I was out at that well yesterday. I fixed that pump yesterday." And Bill turned around and without hesitating, Bill said, "No, yesterday you worked on it. Today I want you to fix it." And that just always resonated with me. All right. I thought it was absolutely perfect, his retort. Okay. Um, and so, of course, the rest of the week, the joke was, I don't need a work order, I need a fix order. But that is true. That's why, I do preach planners, okay, to develop quality job plans. I don't care how many job plans you develop. I want a quality job plan. So I don't care if it's a 20, 40, or 30% are executing that work. We are going to execute it to the same level of quality assurance and quality control. Okay. I can't have a bunch of mavericks going off and saying, well, this is the way I did it. Right. And if you think about it, and we did talk about this yesterday, that 30 percenters, right, the new people to the group, a lot of times we'll pair them up with a 20 percenter, right? Or an old, I mean this respectfully, but an old timer, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But and we call that OJT. But that OJT is only as good as the person that's doing that on-job training. And if it's with a seasoned veteran, over the years, they've learned the shortcuts. So they pass those shortcuts on to those new people. And so we might be missing a whole bunch of things that we should be looking at. But you know what? I've been here 30 years. You don't really need to do that. Okay. So do it this way. But back to your original question, I am going to put a lot of equipment failures on operations plates. And here's another contributing factor to the reason I say that. We are so focused on short term. And I can admit that I was. When I was a plant manager, I can tell you I was too. Tell me the numbers for today. Tell me the numbers for this week. Tell me the numbers for this quarter. As long as I hit my numbers, corporate will stay off my back. As long as I'm making a profit, we're good. But if I'm coming anywhere close to not hitting my numbers for the day, the week, the month, or whatever, I'm going to tell you, you don't shut that equipment down for anything until we hit the numbers. So maintenance, you go out there with your fingers, stick them in the dike, if you will, get more duct tape, get more baling wire, just get me through today, this week, this month, this quarter, okay? Because that's how we are. We're so short-term focused that leadership does not see the bigger picture to say, hey, you know what? If we don't take this equipment down, there's a likelihood we're causing more damage to that equipment.
And that's going to be costly in so many different areas. And this is like with you just saying that, now we're back to why we all are so vested and interested and passionate about this and want to try to convey good, solid messaging and guidance, and also inspire people to think more critically and kind of get better at the big picture, the long game. Although you still have to have a strong short game, it's not one or the other. You got to be doing both, and that's not easy to do. But maybe the biggest barrier to that is committing to it. So, with that, I want to switch you into the fun question segment because I want to let you get back to work, but I love this part of the first timer kind of experience on CMMS Radio. You
All right,
ready?
So I'm on the Budweiser hot seat right now.
Something like that. I mean,
right,
call
man.
it what you want, man.
All
There
right.
are no wrong answers here. It's just a bit of fun. So,
All right.
Fun question number 1. What is your favorite music?
Favorite music or favorite bands?
Favorite music genre.
Ooh. All right, so that's kind of tough because I got a lot. I'm a big reggae fan.
Okay.
I also like some of the punk rock stuff, like the Clash and Elvis Costello.
All
but
right.
I also love very much classical music.
Very good. Very
so
good.
I run the gamut.
Yeah. Next fun question. What is your favorite sport or hobby? And on sport, it doesn't have to be one that you still play or practice at. It could be one you like to root for, but favorite sport and or hobby.
That's easy. Favorite sport is right over there. That's all my Ironman triathlon stuff when I used to race.
Yeah.
And over here, my favorite sport is football because there's my lifelong favorite football team, the LA Rams.
Yeah, yeah. I remember you went to a game with Ryan Chan. I
I
saw
did.
those pictures on
I did.
LinkedIn. That's pretty cool. All
But
right, here's the
I'm
big
also a
one.
season ticket holder too. So
Oh, well, that's you told me that once. That's right. Very
yep.
cool. Well, August can't come soon enough for you.
No, I'm keeping. Well, it's March Madness right now, so I'm watching some of that. But
You got that. That'll carry you forward another month or so.
oh
All
yeah.
right. Here's the big one on the fun question segment. What is your philosophy, perspective, opinion, anything at all when it comes to the concept of work life balance?
Wow. God, I'm not sure how to answer that because I'm home for 2 days. My wife just got home. I hadn't seen her for 2 weeks, so I got 2 days with her, and now I'm not going to see her again for another 4 weeks, I think. So, is there a balance of life? I mean, in one respect, that's why we're happily married, is we just don't see each other. Um, Look, I am a firm believer that you work hard and then you play hard.
All right. All right.
So I try to do both with a
Well,
balance.
yeah. And I think the reason for that question is it's always interesting to see and hear the responses. And the reason I say there's no wrong answers is we're kind of, seeing what makes sense. Somebody might hear that and go, "Yeah, I agree." Somebody might say, "No, I don't know. I think you got to do it this way." So I don't
Well,
really know.
so let me just piggyback on that a little bit, or add a
Sure.
little bit more to it. Okay, I truly do believe this. I am actually one of the fortunate people in the world that love what I do. I have a deep, deep passion for trying to help organizations and trying to help people. Um, I get off on it. I thoroughly enjoy it. Um, People ask me all the time. I am older, and when you're going to hang up your Delta Diamond cards, and I tell them it's not on the radar. It's just not there. I still love traveling around the world. I love meeting new people. I love seeing new cultures and tasting the food and seeing how other people are doing things. And I'm also in a unique position, Greg, where what I think might be considered world class practice, I may go to a facility in the Philippines, right? And I may see a company there doing something, and I'm like, that's pretty doggone good. And
Yeah.
I have the unbelievable um, opportunity and privilege, maybe that's even a better word, of sharing that with other organizations around the world. So I love it.
Andy Gager. People can find you on LinkedIn. It's Gager. It's also AMG International Consulting. And I want to thank you for not only being here with me on CMMS Radio, finally getting an episode in the can, but I also want to thank you for representing with the CMMS Radio swag. You got the shirt and the cap, and that is really nice for me to see. That's one of
Yeah.
my favorite CMMS Radio shirts because it is, turns out, the only blue one on the planet.
Oh,
It's
there
the
you go.
only, it's the only one.
Well, I feel honored. Believe me, I do. I put it on. My wife's like, "What's that? Did you get a new shirt?"
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah, yeah.
I'm like, "No, I was planning on going bowling after this." But anyways,
There you go. There you go,
um,
man.
hey,
Club
listen,
shirt.
Greg, I truly appreciate it. Again, thank you very much for the opportunity. I hope we have a chance to do some more of these because I thoroughly enjoy it.
Well, I want
Just
to do.
ahead.
I want to do some more on some more specific things like MRO, a
Oh
couple
yeah,
of other things where we can craft it out a bit, but we still want to be, grip it and rip it style.
yeah,
But I want to really showcase your insights and experience and guidance for anybody that it could help. So you're 100% coming back, whether you
and
like it or not.
yeah, leadership would be a good one too. So.
All about
Um,
it.
just an FYI, I'll be in Baltimore next week, and then I immediately go to Irvine.
That and one other thing, so everybody has an awareness. In June, on June 2nd through 5th, Reliable Plant Conference is happening out in Chicago. It'll be in Schaumburg, and we're going to be hosting an awesome onstage panel discussion. And you, Andy, are going to be on that panel with me. I appreciate you joining. You're also going to be doing at least one other presentation there. So I just want to encourage everyone to check out Reliable Plant. Get there if you can. I've got some discounts out there. Use CMMS 5 to put 5% on top of the current flash sale, which expires on the 31st of March, because both Andy and myself would love to see you at Reliable Plant and have a blast at NFMT, Andy.
I plan on it. It's our last year in Baltimore, so it should be a good one.
Yeah. Cool. Thank you for being here with me.
All right. Thank you.
Did you find this episode helpful? Please send us some feedback, suggest a topic, or ask a question. Reach out to CMMS Radio if you need a co-pilot on your CMMS project. Visit CMMSradio.com and use the What's on Your Mind link. Thank you for tuning in to CMMS Radio, your resource for all things CMMS, from selection to implementation, to help you make better choices, learn from industry experts, and have a successful CMMS journey.